All right, Dr. Eugene, I am so excited to have an opportunity to have this conversation with you today. I know I've been following your work for a while. I know you do a ton of work around mindset and how we think and just this idea of like emotional intelligence. So I'm excited to dive in. Brief intro, like Dr. Eugene is a certified transformational mindset coach. He's also board certified clinical pharmacist. And so I know you do a lot of work with both entrepreneurs and execs in just helping them use these science-backed processes to dramatically improve people's performance, their creative thinking, getting in the flow, achieving goals, and so on and so forth. So welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm going to dive into our rapid fire questions to start off with, okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So when I say the words pure joy, what's the first image or memory that comes to your mind?
Image. Oh, like in my life.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, first image. Definitely I'm a kid. I'm trying to form it in my mind now. Yeah, kid, and I'm building things like Legos, Connects. I don't know if people remember what that was. A lot of
Are we
that,
dating
just being in the
ourselves?
moment. Yeah. A lot of building.
Yeah. Is that something that's always interested you, this concept of like creating something?
Yeah, just getting lost in the creation of something. So yeah, during my filmmaking days when I used to do filmmaking too, just got lost in creating the story, editing and all that.
I forgot you had this whole filmmaking side
Yes. Yeah.
of your career too. You are just a multi-talented individual.
Oh, thank you.
um, Speaking of growing up, this is my second question to you. It's a good thing we started there, but like, what is like when you were growing up, whether it's at home or at school, was the idea or concept of happiness or joy something that you grew up learning about?
No, I never learned about it. It was never taught in school. Yeah. And happiness, I would say, is something I did struggle with growing up. Yeah.
Hmm. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I felt left out as a kid. I was kind of weird, high energy, right? So I had a lot of trouble with that from the social aspect of it growing up. I did have friends and things like that, but yeah, and my parents were never home. So they were the immigrant family that were working till late, come home late, not because they didn't love me, but that's the way as a kid you might take it. I want to play with mommy and daddy. Why aren't they home? Do they not care about me?
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the memories I clearly remember, I was in second grade. Mom's teaching me how to cook instant noodles so I can feed myself dinner when I get home from school, right? Like they don't tell anyone that I'm home alone, but I was home alone for most of
Yeah.
my childhood early on.
Yeah. Do you think that played a role in your focus on emotions, our nervous system and our responses around that?
Yeah, the way I perceived all of that and not feeling good about it, as kids, you misinterpret things all the time, right? Which is why I became very money driven because our family was very poor, being immigrants. So I thought money would solve everything. So that's why I worked really hard and that's why I became a pharmacist. Because in the newspaper they said you get a 6-figure salary right out of graduation. It's a stable job. It was and when it made it to the Korean newspaper, because I'm Korean, that's when the parents were just like, "Oh my God, you should." A lot of parents are saying that, right? You should go to pharmacy. Go to pharmacy. Um, yeah, that's kind of how it impacted me. Trying to get back on track with what the question was. I
No, no,
lost
no.
track of
You've
thought.
totally answered it. We're just
Yeah.
gonna make super conversational here. But you talked a bit about how feeling not good enough and this drive for money being the solution um, to how you're feeling. And I think I don't. I mean, I personally don't think that's necessarily changed a whole ton. Like I feel like that whole idea of money solves a lot of how you feel is still something that is pervasive. Do you see that in the clients that you work with?
Oh, absolutely. The whole not that's spot on. It's the not good enough kind of narrative, right? And it took me a long time to realize all of the symptoms that come out when you operate from this mode of belief. Uh, there was a lot of working hard because you actually believe deep down. So it's like maybe if I just work harder, accomplish more, I will finally feel good enough, right? As weird as that sounds, but yeah, and the world rewards hard workers, right? And you're bound for burnout and a lack of fulfillment. So that happened a lot. Um, and a lot of numbing, right? A lot of distracting myself. I was getting drunk at 14 years old, smoking, all that kind of stuff, right? Um, yeah, and I see the same types in a lot of my clients. A lot of my clients are, on paper, it looks amazing. They've accomplished a lot. They're really good at working hard, but if they're honest with themselves, they've been burnt out quite a few times, and they get to a point where they realize, like, I don't want to keep fighting. I don't want to keep working harder. I'm just getting burnt out. Even though I've
Mm-hmm.
accomplished all these things, I'm not enjoying it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's a hustle culture misconception, right? I think it can be very toxic, and it prevents you from being happy and present, right? Like, how many times are you somewhere and you're not present? You're on vacation and you're still thinking about work, or your family and you're still thinking about work. That's the not good enough narrative kicking in. If I'm not doing something, it means I'm not good enough, because what I actually believe about myself is I'm not good enough. I have trouble sitting with myself, being with myself, liking myself, all that.
Yeah. How do you feel um, in the concept of self-awareness or emotional intelligence plays into that realization of, wow, I'm burning out, and drawing the conclusion that the burnout is from the feeling not good enough? Because I feel like that
Correct.
might be quite a journey before one
A lot
realizes
of
that.
people don't realize that. I mean, look, like, this is more than once. I have clients that are like in their 60s, right? Like, one client, for example, he's coming to me, is just like, he accomplished everything he could ever want. He had the
Mm,
multi-million dollar business, all that good stuff, beautiful home, beautiful family. And he's just like, why am I still feeling anxious? Why am I still unhappy? And we're going over this fight response, which is a reactive response when you're not feeling good enough. Your brain does it reactively without thinking. And for him, he realized, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been spending my whole life fighting to prove to people that I'm better than my older brother, because his older brother was an NFL football player. And he remembers a memory when he was in high school. His football coach literally said, don't even bother trying. You're never going to be as good as, the older brother. And so he spends his whole life just trying to prove himself. And he's in his 60s now, going, why is it that no matter how much more I accomplish, I'm still not happy? And that's what he realized. And I think it's a very important thing when it comes to emotional intelligence, because you're not even aware that you're doing that. You're still operating from fear. And when you're in fear, a lot of things that you need don't happen. Your empathy turns off, right? Your ability to connect with people, your critical thinking skills, your problem solving skills. And you spend your whole life avoiding things you don't want happening, that it doesn't help you get closer to what you do want happening, right? Just because you're avoiding that thing doesn't mean you're getting closer to what you want.
mm,
So when it comes to emotional intelligence and that resilience, I think it's so important to become self-aware. And one of the most important things to become self-aware, I think, is it's understanding that everything comes from inside of you, right? So humans have this weird ability, right? Like, if you were to watch like a deer out in the woods and a tiger pops out to attack it, and it outruns a tiger, and if the threat is gone, if you watch what that deer does, it just moves on with its day as if nothing's happened, even though it almost just died, like literally just died. You see it just kind of shake off the experience, and it goes back to eating and drinking. But if you see a human in the same scenario, we have this weird ability where, just with our thought alone, we can keep reacting to that moment, right? We're sitting there thinking about it, oh my God, I almost died, for hours. You're thinking about it for months, years. You still bring it up at parties. Remember that time 5 years ago, I almost died? Wasn't that crazy? And that's what's preventing us from having the emotional intelligence, because we're in one long emotional reaction to one experience in our life, simply from thinking about it over and over again. And you do it so many times, it goes on autopilot, right? Like a habit. You keep thinking about these things about yourself that you don't like. So emotional intelligence is the ability to shorten that reaction period. That's what emotional intelligence is, right? Like, you're able to just get out of it. And one of the key things to understand is, when you're scared, your brain will focus on things outside of you. You're looking at your circumstances, right? Your environment, the people in your life, the things are happening, the circumstances. When you're afraid, it makes sense to hyper focus on the outside, because if you're
mm,
out in the woods and you hear a scary noise, this is not a time to be reflecting on the inside. You might die.
mm, mm-hmm,
But because research has shown that emotional pain can be just as painful as physical pain, your brain still perceives it as a threat.
mm-hmm,
So when we're not feeling good, when we're not feeling happy, your brain can't help in survival just focus on your outside environment. And because we're not having that skill to go within, That's what emotional intelligence is we're getting better at taking ownership, right? And one practical way I explain that to people, because that's the first thing. Like, if you're not aware of this, you're going to keep staying in the loop. You're going to keep staying in the matrix. So the big awareness for me is just like, I explain it in story terms because stories are easy to understand. I share this story all the time with all the, executives and all that. When they say something to me like, oh, my team's pissing me off today, right? Like, they're the reason I'm annoyed. They're the reason I'm frustrated. And I share this story about my daughter. I'm like, I used to say that, like, you're making me so mad, to my daughter. And look at the science behind this. If a little kids misinterpret stuff all the time, what might she believe if I'm telling her you're making me mad? In her mind, she's going, oh, daddy's saying I'm making him mad. It must be true that there's such a thing that I can cause someone else's emotions. Like, I'm the cause of his anger. And whoa, daddy's really mad right now. And feels so scary. Therefore, she might develop a fear of, quote unquote, making people mad. And you can never cause anyone else's emotions, by the way. And I'm going to prove it. Why? And I started reflecting, how might this affect her as an adult? Okay. So imagine she has the unethical boss that overworks her. And because she's afraid of making the boss mad, she'll comply. People pleasing is a survival response, right? And you don't set boundaries. So she'll say yes, even though it's sacrificing her mental health and her physical health. And then, you know what really got me like a fire under my butt? I was like, oh my God, what if she ends up in a relationship, maybe with some boy, and he's pressuring her to sleep with him and she doesn't want to? Because she's so afraid of making him mad, she's going to say yes, even though she wants to say no. And that was the big realization for me where, look, I need to take ownership. I need to explain to her. And that's when I went up to her and I'm like, baby girl, you can never make daddy mad. Whenever daddy's mad, it's because he's scared. It's because daddy has his own junk. If you look at a mama lion with its cubs and you approach it, you see it's bare its teeth at you with anger. Anger is always a reflection of fear, right? Because it feels very vulnerable. So I'm getting angry because I was very sensitive about being perceived as a bad father. Because I had a rough relationship with my father. He left our family when I was a teenager. I used to have these resentful thoughts. I'm never going to be a bad dad like him when I become a dad. So when my daughter's not listening to me, my interpretation is that I'm a bad dad. And who am I looking out for in the moment? It's myself. And ownership is changing the phrase. It's simple. Instead of saying you're making me mad, it's just simple as I'm feeling mad. So whenever my kids say, oh, mommy's mad at me, daddy's mad at me, I'm like, no, mommy's not mad at you. Mommy's just mad. That's the way I try to explain it. And then I turn it around on the leader and I say, tell me again, is it your team that's pissing you off? Or are you going to take an opportunity here to take ownership that you might have a role to do with the anger that you're feeling right now? Because the moment you take ownership, now you're on a better path to creating your own happiness as well. You stop holding other people responsible for your happiness. Because I think that's the cause of the lack of it, is when we hold someone else responsible for our emotions, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, you've just given so many things for me to think about and reflect on. Like, I have a young daughter as well. And I feel like, sweeping generalizations here, but like, I feel like our parents' generation may not have had the opportunity to have conversations like this about emotional intelligence, about happiness, about self-awareness, and all that. And so they didn't do it out of menace. Like, they just did it because they were reacting to their fears and their angers, like you
Correct.
said. And so we
Correct.
may be on a similar path unless we consciously stop it, right? And so the first thing, the first step, it sounds like, for what you were sharing with us, is that you have to take ownership of the fact that you are ultimately responsible for your feelings and how you react and whatnot. So let's say I'm like, okay, now I've taken ownership, but now I feel like, holy crap, it's all my fault. I feel like it's like there's this fine line between taking ownership and then just being like, oh, I'm a horrible human being for doing this. So like, what's the next thing you would advise then for people?
It's all about awareness. That's the first thing I bring every person through, whether it's a talk I'm giving or a client I'm working with. Because the moment you're going, oh crap, I'm a bad parent, you're making it about you and it's not about you. You're judging yourself. You see what I'm saying? Because when we're afraid, we start judging. So judging is a survival response too. Think about why people gossip. People gossip, I guarantee you, because they carry some sort of insecurity about themselves. Oh, I'm not good enough, so I'm going to fight. My way of fighting is to try to attack and put other people down in hopes that I feel better about myself. Oh, that feels good. You get that dopamine rush to like try to hurt someone or attack someone, right? Behind their back. It's the same reason we judge. When we're scared, we judge, right? It's a tribal reason, right? Like I want to, can I fit into this tribe?
Yeah.
It's very survival instinct. But that's the thing. It's to understand it's, oh crap, when you're going, oh crap, I'm a horrible human being, to take ownership is to be aware of why you're even doing that. Oh, I'm doing this because I'm just really afraid. Oh, there's my not good enough kicking in again. Most people don't realize this because you do it on autopilot. 90 to 95% of your brain by the time you're 35 years old is autopilot, subconscious. It's a series of repetitive behaviors, repetitive thoughts, automatic responses. All that's just happening because of all of your unique life experiences. So if we can't be aware of these things, of how often we're in this reactive mode and how often we carry these negative beliefs and thoughts about ourselves, then the change is not going to happen. And that's part of the whole process, is just awareness. I always talk about the fight, flight, freeze response, right? Are you fighting to be good enough by trying to accomplish more? Or are you fighting to please people? That's how you become good enough. Or are you
Mm.
fleeing? Some people avoid, right? Procrastinate. Some people numb themselves with alcohol, sex, drugs to the point of addiction. No judgment
Mm.
around any of this. It's just
Mhm.
being aware. I see why I do that.
Mhm.
And freeze response. That's just when you don't take action anymore. You wake up in the
Mm.
morning, you don't want to get out of bed, or you're overwhelmed, so you don't make decisions. You're paralyzed in fear, because what if I do this thing and it proves that I'm not good enough, for example. A lot of high performers are fighters, though, but they wear it like a badge of honor. They don't even realize they're still surviving from a fear, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think even in your just description of the fight and flight and freeze, all these modes, I can see potentially people being like, oh, I didn't realize that I was in this mode because I still have this fear of not being good enough. Do you think this concept of like, I'm not good enough is one of the biggest, whether it's limiting
Yes,
beliefs or however we want to term it, that
it's a very
drives?
common one. It's a very
Mm,
common one because, people don't realize that your worth can't be measured, but we keep
mm,
measuring it in our own ways. If I accomplish more, then I will be good enough. But it's ridiculous. It's like, who set, there's no body organization saying this is how you become worth this many units, but we create it in our minds because of our unique experiences, right? Whether it's family, society, right? Oh, I need to accomplish more. You and I are Asian, right? Status is a big value for a lot of Asian cultures, right? So it's just, it's this worth kind of concept that's so important to examine, because if we don't realize like how that's not even real, like how do you measure someone's worth? You know what I
mm,
mean?
mm,
But we keep doing it. That's what's causing the suffering. It's
mm,
a concept that's not even real. And our
mm,
brain gets easily programmed into what it thinks is real all the time. How do you know it's
mm.
easily fooled? You ever been in a dream and when you're in it, you thought it was real?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
happens a lot when we're kids. So anyway, that's kind of what I realize, is the more awareness is what helps shatter the reality, right? Like you just got yourself out of the matrix. So once you're out of the matrix, now you have choice, right? If you're not aware of it, you don't have a choice. You don't have the power to change it. So that's why it's the first thing I mentioned is just becoming aware of that. Um, yeah.
You talked a little bit about how we we work a lot in whichever capacity we see it in order to prove our self worth really to ourselves, because that's really, we're seeing it from that angle. And it made me think about one of the things that you post on Instagram, which, by the way, if anybody's listening to this, check out Dr. Eugene's Instagram because he has a ton of really great content. I love the stuff that you put out there. It's really well explained. There was one that really sunk in for me, and it was, I don't remember the exact title of it, but it was something around why there's no like such thing as laziness. You were talking about this
Yes.
concept of like, can you share a little bit about that, because I think that was really very valuable.
Yeah, when you view someone as lazy, you're judging them, right? You're not
Hmm.
understanding them, you're judging them, right? Like there's a negative connotation to that word. But if you look at the science behind what it is, laziness, what someone would describe as laziness, it's a freeze response. It's a survival mechanism to the fear, right? I'm so paralyzed in fear, I can't move. Imagine a tiger's in front of you and you're paralyzed in fear. It's the same kind of survival mechanism, because if you actually believe you're not good enough, and you're that afraid, your body might paralyze in fear. So that's why you're just not getting up and doing things, right? And then someone calls you lazy, and someone in their judgment of you calls you lazy. Versus if you're in an empathetic mode, you might understand, whoa, this person must be going through some pain. They might be holding some pain inside they're not even aware of. I wonder what's going on. And you might get curious if you're empathetic versus judging, right? It's like, get your butt up, right? Like for parents, they do it because they're afraid that they're going to be viewed as the parent that has the lazy kid. It's not about the kid. It's about themselves. And I always call out parents for that. I'm like, you don't worry about your kids. You're worried about how you will feel if that thing you're worried about happens with your kid. So don't say you worry for your kids. Be honest and say you're worried about yourself if that thing happens to your kid. So anyway, but yeah, like there's no such thing as laziness. It's just a freeze response. And if we can understand that, then maybe we'll have more compassion, more empathy. You're more willing to listen to their story of what they might have been through, or what their family might have been through. Who knows? But guaranteed, whenever I meet people in freeze that other people might consider lazy, I can see the pain. I can see the hurt once I start asking the questions.
That's such an important concept, because it goes both ways. Like there's people who, I guess, judge other people as lazy because of their own fears and their own worried about the reflection and whatever. It's back to that insecurity thing. And then there's a lot of people who self-judge as lazy, who are like, I just procrastinate all the time because I'm a lazy human being. But really what you're saying is that there is a fear underneath that that's blocking them from taking the action. And I think that's so valuable because sometimes I see people try to solve this problem where they're like, oh, I'm procrastinating, so I'm just going to add another habit. I'm just going to put this reminder or this other thing. And it's what you're seeing is like, it's not really getting to the root of it. Like you're not procrastinating and you're not lazy because you need another habit. Or another reminder. It's because you actually need to figure out what you are afraid of and what that fear is that is causing this freeze response before you take the action.
And that's exactly right. And look, when you're hard on yourself, it's because you actually don't like yourself. You're trying to get rid of a part of yourself that you're embarrassed of, right? That's one of the things I do as an exercise is, think about the moment in your life where you felt most embarrassed about yourself or most ashamed of yourself, right? That version of you has been trying to ask for your help, but you keep giving it a to-do list. You keep giving that person judgment. You keep judging that person, treating that person poorly. That's why the feeling perpetuates, right? Because you actually don't have a good relationship with yourself, right? And that was the big ahas for me. Oh my gosh. I remember when a leader was asked that cliche question about relationships, how do I find the perfect one? Which, by the way, is a survival question, right? What they're really asking is, I feel insecure about myself. I feel incomplete. How do I find someone else that can make me happy, right? It's a false concept. And he understood this, that it was already being asked from a place of fear, right? When it comes to relationships. And he asked a very powerful question, which was, would you go out with yourself? And I remember that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because number one, I realized how quickly my answer was no, reactively. It just came to my awareness. I'm like, oh, wow, I actually don't like myself. I actually don't accept myself the way I am right now. I keep thinking I have to be this other person. Then I will finally accept me and be proud of me. You see what I'm saying? But you know what the bigger realization was? I was just like, oh my goodness, I can tell my wife that I love her and I do all these nice things for her because I claim it's because I love her. But if I don't have a good relationship with myself and I don't love myself, I'm actually doing it for me, not for her. You see what I'm saying? When I believe I'm not good enough, in the fight response, my brain goes, quick, do these nice things for other people. Maybe you will be good enough one day. So if you ever meet those people that overgive to the point of burnout, and they claim it's because they care so much, right? You can call BS on them. Be like, no, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. Because you're so scared of setting the boundaries for your own health and for your own growth that you're willing to let other people cross them, and you're overgiving now because you actually don't value yourself. Because people who believe they're not good enough behave that way. Is this making sense? Like the science behind it, right?
Yeah, wow. I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours on this. This is like a whole bunch of can of worms. Like we've opened so many cans of worms today. But I think what it does do though, like wrapping up sort of this whole, all these cans of worms that we've opened, but like really it comes back to that very first thing that you said, which is self-awareness. It's understanding that there is a reason behind these behaviors. And I think the other thing you brought up, which I think is really critically important, is the compassion piece. We're bringing these things up. You are bringing these things up, not because we're trying to highlight that you are flawed or like a bad human being or like you don't deserve to feel better or do the things that you want to do, achieve the goals you want to achieve. It's just, it comes back to like this being aware means then we can be compassionate about why we're doing these things and then resolve the tension around that so that you can keep moving in the direction that you want to move, whether it's a personal thing or a professional thing, career, love, whatever it is, family, it doesn't matter. It's like you are now coming at it from a better place, which is a more emotionally intelligent place.
100%. Emotionally
I love
intelligent
that.
people are willing to work with themselves, because if you're not willing to work with yourself, you're going to keep being hard on yourself and you're never going to get those results you're looking for.
I love that. How do you feel, sort of wrapping up the conversation, like how do you feel emotional intelligence can relate to this feeling and this concept of happiness in our lives?
You know, when you take ownership over your emotions, and you acknowledge that all of these are feelings there, the reason why that helps you move towards your happiness is because you're actually developing a good relationship with all of your feelings. This includes your anxiety, your frustration. You're actually trusting of the feelings. And one way I like to explain this is because your feelings are actually trying to help you. They're not trying to hurt you. Your brain just got fooled into it, right? And that's one perspective that's important to understand. So how I feel about that is, look, if you, well, you're a healthcare professional too, right? Like, you would agree with me that if you let your body relax, it does its job, and it just naturally, without you having to tell it to do it, it will move towards balance, right? Homeostasis. Agreed? Right? So the big aha for me was, wait, so if your body's out of balance and you let it do its job, it's going to move towards balance without you telling it to. I'm like, wait, what if the mind is the same thing? When your mind is out of balance, it's using feelings to try to reflect to you something's out of balance here. And if you let your feelings do its job, it will move you back towards happiness. But when we don't let it do its job, we're avoiding the feeling. We're numbing the feeling. We're fighting to accomplish more, hopefully to get rid of the feeling. We feel like we have to do something about it versus just be with it and get the information from it that we need. Because the moment you process it, you've just moved back towards balance and happiness.
I love that.
Like, that was like the concept that I realized was just like, oh, this makes so much sense. Your feelings are there to help you. But what we do is, because the reason we can't do it as much, it's kind of like you ever see those false scare scenes in the movies, like in a horror movie, where the bushes are rustling, the music's getting intense.
Yeah.
But if you just keep watching, out pops the cute little bunny. You see what I'm saying? And you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
But what happens in our minds is, when we're feeling frustrated, stressed, anxious, right, is that the music's getting intense, the bushes are rustling, but before we look at what comes out, we're already fight, flight, freezing. We're already working harder. Quick, I got to do this or do that. Or we're avoiding, procrastinating, numbing, or we freeze. But if we just sat with the feeling, guaranteed, feelings are always a record of the past, by the way, right? Emotions are a record of the past. Out pops that little kid who believed that they weren't good enough. Out pops that little kid that felt embarrassed. Out pops that kid that felt ashamed. And if you can see that, you might actually have some compassion and empathy for yourself. Going, wow, you really didn't know any better in that moment and you've been stuck there. I actually feel for you now. And then that's going to help you get towards happiness, because all of this is you. There's these separations, disconnections that happen within us, and we're not reconnecting with ourselves. And that's what's preventing us from experiencing a deeper level of joy and happiness and gratitude.
Yeah.
And that's emotional intelligence, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I think one of the biggest misconceptions around this whole concept of people who, I mean, you can point them out on the street. There are people who just look happy, they radiate happy. And I think those people, I mean, not I think, like I know, people who are genuinely happy and live in this state of joy, it's not that they don't feel negative emotions, because that would be really weird, right? Like, you're supposed to feel all the emotions. It's that they can come back to that middle ground. They understand that they have to process, they have to feel through that emotion, understand the interpretation of that emotion that your brain is trying to give you. Like you were saying, awareness around the emotion, and then instead of suppressing it or pretending it's not there. It's actually understanding what that emotion is trying to tell you, and then understanding that brings you back to that state of homeostasis, that middle ground, that natural balance. I think people who are happier and live with more joy go through that process as part of what they do.
Yes.
And it allows them to go back to that middle where they just feel more at peace again. And the negative emotions don't feel as strong.
They have that intelligence. They have that intelligence. Like, you ever have that friend that you really trust and you're trying to get something done, but you're really afraid of it for whatever reason. And because you trust your friend, you let them take you through it. That's what your feelings kind of feel like too. It feels really uncomfortable, but if you trust it and you let yourself process it, then you're going to come out stronger on the other side. And it's about changing that relationship with your feelings, because most people don't have a good relationship with their feelings. And that takes intelligence. Yeah.
I love that. All right, everybody, I encourage you to check out Dr. Eugene's work. We have some links close to this video so that you can connect with him on Instagram and see what else he's offering out around this realm of emotional intelligence. I love the work that you do, Dr. Eugene. I have some questions to wrap up today's chat. So we're going to go through these rapid fire, okay?
Let's do it.
There's 3. All right. What is a color you associate with happiness?
I'm laughing because my favorite color is actually blue. But with happiness, but the expression is, "Why are you so blue?" when people are sad.
Right. Well, do you think blue can bring out happiness for you? Because I think that's
for
fine.
me it does, because blue represents peace, right?
Right.
Like, it represents that sereneness, that calmness.
Yeah.
Despite everything else on the outside feeling like it's a big fire going on, you feel that peace and contentment and that happiness on the inside. So the color that came up for me,
I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. Blue is fantastic. Is there a food or beverage that you associate with happiness? No judgment.
No judgment. I love like Nashville style fried chicken sandwiches. It's like the chicken, like the coleslaw and the sauce. But yeah, that's something my wife constantly makes fun of me for.
That sounds actually delicious.
Yeah.
Maybe one time, maybe I'll visit you and we'll indulge in that.
Yes.
Okay, last question. I want you to imagine that there is a being, whatever form this being is in. They're being plopped down on Earth for the very first time. So completely blank slate, no preconceptions, no beliefs, no memories, like completely new and fresh. What is the one thing that you want to tell them about happiness?
Oh, that's a deep question. I have to hold on. What's the one thing I would, like, a piece of advice?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I'm like frozen, because like my mind is just like, man, I have so many questions for that being, because you must know the key to happiness, because that's the very thing you need to be happy, is to just be able to let go of all of the meanings we give things, right? And the perspectives we carry, and just be present. So it's weird, but it's just like, you're an example of how to achieve happiness, because you're giving yourself a blank slate in the present moment. Is this making sense? Like,
I love that answer. No, that's an awesome answer, actually, to just think about the fact that is the state of happiness. It's like before you let all those things into your sphere and create all those like preconceptions and filters, like before all of that happens, that clean slate is happiness.
Exactly. Just like the deer just let go of the experience, even though it got attacked by a tiger. It's the art of just letting go of your day, letting go of your memories, and just being present.
Wow. I did not expect that. And that was awesome. That was an awesome answer. Okay. Thank you again so much for your time. I encourage everyone who is watching this to check out more of Dr. Eugene's work. And again, thank you so much for sharing all your insights.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.